Hey guys, welcome to another episode in the deep playthrough of AC Unity. Still in the epilogue, so to say, of the deep playthrough. Scanning the database for any entries that I may have missed or not sure whether I've already read them out loud in the actual gameplay playthrough part itself. Quite a lot, but we finished, or I read already most of people, or yeah, basically all of it. The ones I didn't read, I was pretty sure I've already read it earlier in the playthrough. Same goes for locations. Now we still have the miscellaneous section, and the songs we already did. So I'm not even gonna open it up. It's also very annoying because the songs actually play. So you can, if you want to read the story about it or the description, yeah, that's pretty annoying if the song is playing at the same time. But we already did so while opening up the social clubs, because those songs I think are linked to the social clubs. Once you open up or upgrade the social club, you'll get one or two songs related to it, I think. Newspapers we read quite some, but there are way more than I expected. So we do have to still read some newspapers. This one is very short. Letters from Elise.
Paris.
I don't really have to read them because it's just listening. So I already listened to a couple of them, but a couple was still to do. Cafe Theater History. Yeah, I think these are a couple of entries that we found while upgrading that we got while upgrading the Cafe Theater. Like some secret rooms got opened up, and yeah, there was a couple of times a note in there, and I think that is what is in here, so we have to read those. Then the assassin intel, I think this is from the Helix Rift missions, where you have to save assassins from some kind of a weird time-space anomaly or some disruption into the Animus. These are quite a lot, and some of them are also really long. So yeah, I do have to want to make my way through it, but this really could take some time. So that is quite a lot. Items. Yeah, these are also apparently things I may have picked up in the game or touched upon. They are not that long of a description, so I have to read through that. And the events. Yeah, also, I don't think I read a lot of these yet. So let's just start and yeah, hope to get through it. Here we go. August 10th. On August 6th, 1792, a crowd gathered on the Champs de Mars once more to petition the king's deposition. An atmosphere of besiegement reigned in Paris, but it was not against foreign enemies that the insurgents sought to defend themselves, but those from within. Those who were in a position to derail the revolution. Jacobins and Cordeliers took refuge in the Paris city hall along with 7,000 soldiers. The king strengthened his positions at the Tuileries Palace from 2,000 to 3,000 men, mainly Swiss guards. On the night of August 10th, with the monarchy just hours from its impending doom, the tocsin sounded to mark the beginning of the revolt. Alright, what the hell is a tocsin? One moment. An alarm bell or signal. We use this resignation as a tocsin to warn of the danger of a dictatorship. Alright. The insurgents wanted to ensure that the king would be unable to regain his rights. The fighting was swift and brutal. The Swiss guard were massacred almost to a man. The king meanwhile took advantage of the confusion to slip away from the palace and place himself in the hands of the National Convention. Funny how the noble are so rarely the first to act nobly. Ultimately, the assault led to the demise of the Legislative Assembly, the formal abolition of the monarchy, and the creation of the National Convention. It would also lead less directly to the September massacres a month later. It's crazy how that all imploded. One moment, I'm just curious. Legislative Assembly versus National Convention. I think it's both a kind of a parliament or some sorts. The Legislative Assembly was also quite short-lived. It was from October 91 to September 92. It provided the focus of political debate and revolutionary lawmaking between the periods of the National Constituent Assembly and the National Convention. The National Constituent Assembly was also very short-lived, 89 till 91. The National Assembly was 89 till 91. Then it became the Legislative Assembly. No. Man, this is so freaking confusing what they did in that time period. So it was the National Assembly, then it was the National Constituent Assembly, and then it became the Legislative Assembly. But it's, and that after that it became the, I think, the National Convention. Right, and after the convention, it was more or less the French Directory. Alright, it is super confusing, a lot of changes in very short time frame. Alright, 13 Vendémiaire, that's one of those weird revolutionary month namings. They had like a new naming convention for the months of the year. The fall of Robespierre after his arrest on 9th Thermidor 2nd year unto. It really sounds almost like a fictional book. They were really crazy in the head at that time. Why would you abolish like the regular months? It's crazy. July 1794 ended the terror and led to a more civilized stage of the revolution. It meant also a resurgence in the royalist activity, and in 1795 the convention was afraid that monarchists might win the next election. As a precaution, it adopted in August 1795 a decree called Of the Two Birds, stating that 500 of the 750 members of the future two assemblies will be current members of the convention. Wow, that's also so authoritarian, it's crazy. You think it had more to do with consolidating their power, don't you? I hate that you've become so cynical, and well done. Those elections were scheduled for 20 Vendémiaire on 4th mid-October 1795, and Paris royalists were determined to make the convention revoke the rule. On 11th Vendémiaire, 7 Paris sections declared themselves as insurgents. Some of the National Guard joined them. The convention ordered Barras to take military measures, and on the field Bonaparte became the de facto military leader. On 13 Vendémiaire, October 5th, the insurgents, some mention 25,000 people, marched on the convention at the Tuileries. Bonaparte had put in place a number of cannon procured by Joachim Murat, and after receiving the order from Barras, told the troops to open fire. Grape shot was very efficient on such urban terrain, causing around 300 deaths among the royalists. That action earned Bonaparte the nickname of General Vendémiaire and is considered by some as the true beginning of his rise to power. Oh yes, Napoleon earned his fame firing grape shot at crowds of protesters. What a hero. He also earned several enemies, can't imagine why. Yeah, it's just crazy all around what happened there. Assassination of Louis Michel Le Pelletier. A noble by birth, Michel Le Pelletier de Saint-Fargeau was an ardent defender of the people's cause and symbolically relinquished his titles of nobility. In June 1790 he became president of the National Assembly. On January 20, 1793 he cast the deciding vote for the death of Louis XVI, but only after a great deal of hesitation. Well, I should think so. On the very evening of the vote, Le Pelletier was killed under mysterious circumstances at a cafe in the Palais Royal. Contemporary sources credit a former royal guardsman as the killer, but the exact identity of the murderer remains mysterious to this day. Alright, I don't think he was a target in the main campaign. 1 second, AC Unity. Pelletier. Ah, yes, we did kill him. Alright, auto da fe. An auto da fe form from the Portuguese for act of faith was originally a ritual of the Inquisition wherein the accused made proof of their good faith. However, since the ritual generally ended with the accused being burned at the stake, in the popular mind auto da fe came to mean the burning itself. The term came to France during the Revolution and was turned inside out, now meaning a revolutionary act of faith against Christian clerics. Alright. Also warped. Death of Mirabeau. On April the 2nd, 1791, Honoré Gabriel Riquetti Mirabeau lay on his deathbed. The 42-year-old was exhausted from his excessive drinking and womanizing. Has anyone ever been so exhausted from womanizing that they have to go straight to their deathbed? I mean, that's actually quite impressive. I think I'd probably have been standing at the end of his bed as he went, applauding. Mirabeau had been a double agent since the Estates General of 1789. He had received money from Louis XVI in return for his advisory services and to make sure that the revolution would never overthrow the monarchy. An impassioned speaker who was always willing to stand up to his enemies. His death caused a considerable amount of dismay in Paris. He was seen as a potential minister as well as a first-rate thinker. His ashes were later transferred to the Pantheon. And yet, in 1792, when an iron chest was discovered at the Tuileries Palace containing correspondence between Louis XVI and, among others, Mirabeau, the latter was immediately discredited and removed from the Pantheon. Estate General of 1789. The Estate General was a general assembly representing the three classes of estates of French society: the clergy, the first estate, the nobility, the second estate, and the peasantry, the third estate. The Estate General was not a legislative body like the English Parliament, rather its role was to advise the king, with whom all authority lay. Ah, okay, I was not aware of that. I mean, I do think there was a lot of reason to reorganize the structure of the country. But the way in which it was done was totally out of order in my view. Or at least it totally went into mass psychosis territory. I have often imagined what it might be like to be a king. I think my first rule would be to make all crime illegal. Boom, just like that, you're welcome. Yeah, we already read this one, by the way. It was infrequently called before the onset of the revolution. The last meeting of the Estate General was in 1614. The Estate General sat for several weeks in May and June 1789 to address the financial crisis facing the realm, thanks in no small part to the French government's role in financing the American Revolution. The meeting quickly came to an impasse over the first item on the agenda, however. Whether the Estate General should vote collectively by estate, which would give an advantage to the first and second estates, or vote individually, which would give the more numerous third estate the advantage. Deadlocked, the deputies of the third estate began to discuss political reforms rather than the financial crisis that had been the original agenda. The meeting of the Estates General dissolved when the third estate declared itself the National Assembly and announced that it would conduct the nation's affairs. The first and second estates were invited to join the assembly, but it was clear which way the political wind was blowing. The French Revolution was beginning. Yeah, interesting. Execution of Georges Danton. In 1793, three men aspired to lead France: Robespierre, Danton and Marat. Danton's reputation preceded him. He was partial to money, women and good living. Oh, what an oddball. It was said that he would readily change sides if there was a profit in it for him. Like many others, he was known to be corrupt. It seemed they all were, with the exception of Robespierre, known as the Incorruptible. Danton, however, was not sufficiently guarded. They wouldn't dare, he said, set on putting principles before men. Robespierre knew this and would indeed dare. On April the 5th, Desmoulins and Danton were led to the Place de la Révolution, the present-day Place de la Concorde. Which year is that? I think 93. Robespierre thus sent his friend to the guillotine. He closed the shutters in his room to avoid seeing or hearing anything. However, the convoy that carried the members of the indulgent party to the scaffold passed in front of Robespierre's house. Danton recognized the building. Refusing to sit, he shouted out, "Robespierre, you will follow us shortly. Your house shall be beaten down and sowed with salt." Just before his execution, Danton turned to Sanson, his executioner, and said, "Show my head to the people, it is worth seeing. It's nice to have confidence in your appearance, but that's taking it a bit far." The blade that fell marked the end of the indulgence. Robespierre was now free to reign supreme. It's crazy, just kill your opponents. It's totally crazy. Those guys need to be killed themselves first and foremost. And I'm not taking sides here, but just killing everybody off is not, yeah, unless you want to have civil war, fine. But anyways, his executioner is Sanson. Let's see, because we had two executioners over here. Here, this is one. Yeah, it's Charles-Henri Sanson. He had like 3,400 executions. Pretty crazy. And there was also another person, but I think that was more of a mythical figure, but also dressed as an executioner. Here, this one. The giant Iscariot. But this is like a mythical figure, not real. Alright, where were we? Over here. Alright, execution of Louis XVI. Yeah, I'm pretty sure we already read this one. I'm gonna skip it. It's an important event, but I'm pretty sure we already read it. And it's I also have to get a bit through all these entries. Fate of Versailles. After the abolition of the aristocracy and Louis XVI's deposition. Yeah, or you know what, I will read it anyways. January 21st, 1793 was a cold day in Paris. The dreary winter of 92-93 brought a morose, dark and icy atmosphere upon the French capital. On the morning of his execution, locked in his cell at the temple, Louis prayed for the salvation of his soul and prepared to meet his creator. Alright, what the hell is morose? sullen and ill-tempered. Alright, at the foot of the scaffold, his hands were bound. He proceeded to climb the steps. Once atop the scaffold next to the guillotine, he stood up straight as he had at his trial and decided to speak to the crowds. I die innocent of all the crimes laid to my charge. I pardon those who have occasioned my death. And I pray to God that the blood you are going to shed may never fall on France. An order was given to roll the drums to drown out his voice. Louis was nudged forward to the guillotine plank, whereupon his voice failed and his words were lost. It was 10:24 a.m. In the space of a few seconds, Louis' head was placed in the headstock. Then the executioner pulled the release mechanism and the blade fell down and severed his head, which toppled into a wicker basket. The executioner grasped it by the hair and held it up for the people to see. Cries of Vive la Nation and Vive la République, Vive la Nation, Vive la République were heard. The crowd then chorused the emblematic revolutionary song Ça ira, literally it will be fine. Hardly the most rousing or confident sentiment to come out with after chopping off a king's head. It'll be fine, honestly, it'll be fine. I'd be looking for a little more certainty in my songs. I agree with that footnote. Fate of Versailles. After the abolition of the aristocracy and Louis XVI's deposition, the royal city of Versailles suffered a drastic drop in population. From roughly 60,000 souls in 1889, the city's population plummeted to fewer than 30,000 in just 4 years. Looters, attracted by the abandoned royal palace and the many noble estates, added an element of lawlessness that wouldn't be driven out until the early 19th century. Holy shit, that's like... not that long. It's like, I don't know, 5 or 10 years. When King Louis Philippe declared the Palais de Versailles a national museum dedicated to all the glories of France. Flying magnetic buoy experiments. In the middle of the 18th century, a great many experiments involving electricity were conducted. In England, Stephen Gray demonstrated that the human body could become electrified. He suspended the young boy on silk ropes and by generating static electricity to charge the boy's body, showed how the boy's hands took on a mysterious attractive power, allowing him to pull light objects toward him without touching them. I'd love to see the parental consent form for that. I intend to suspend your young boy from silk ropes and then electrify him. Sign here. In France, French clergyman and physicist Abbé Nollet carried out the same experiment and discovered that if a person brought a finger close to the boy's body, a spark was produced. It was said to be an electric fluid that passed from one body to another. Tell it to the judge, mate. Yeah, pretty crazy. Food shortages and riots. The shortage of bread was one of the driving factors behind the French Revolution. Droughts in the summer of 88 caused the price of grain to skyrocket. In 89, the price of one loaf of bread was more than half a day's pay for the common workers. And that's when there was bread to be had. One of the objectives of the Women's March in October 89 was to demand bread from the king himself. What did they expect him to do? Buy a bread maker, whip up a wrap? Even after the revolution, food continued to be scarce. Trouble with crops combined with a need to provide the army with bread led to a shortage across France. Merchants were accused of price fixing and food hoarding, leading to riots in the marketplace. The newly formed government tried to fix the problem by setting bread prices, but given that they fixed the price well below the cost of grain, this only fueled the problems it attempted to solve. Because the Templars were hoarding food and fixing prices to cause riots, so that worked out well for them, didn't it? Alright, that was the footnote over there, when the merchants were accused of price fixing and food hoarding. Apparently the Templars had a role in that. Machine Infernal. I think we already read it, but I will read it. On December the 24th, the Machine Infernal, 1800, an attempt was made to assassinate the first consul, Napoleon Bonaparte. The Infernal Machine was the explosive device used in an attempt to blow up the coach carrying the first consul as he left the Place du Carrousel at the Tuileries and made his way along Rue Saint-Nicaise to the opera. Miraculously, Bonaparte was unscathed. Investigations initially led the authorities to suspect the Jacobins before they realized that it was a royalist plot. This entry doesn't mention the best part. Get this, Napoleon escapes a bomb meant for him that killed 22 people. And instead of going home and cowering like any normal human being, he still goes to the opera. Of course, the assassin should have known right then he was 3 peanuts short of a bull. I mean, this was a man who had been taught how each day could be your last, how you should live life to the full. And what does he do? He spends 4 hours listening to some woman in a Viking helmet yelling in the theater. That must have struck fears into the hearts of his enemies like nothing else. Yeah, pretty funny. Mirabeau and the Pantheon. Mirabeau's death prompted a desire to honor the great men who forged the revolution. On April the 4th, 1791, the Saint Genevieve Church was transformed into the Pantheon of great men, with the following inscription on the building's pediment: to its great men, a grateful nation. Ah, this is the Saint Genevieve Church. I read about that, I think, before, but that is the precursor to the Pantheon. I couldn't find it, I think, earlier on the map. I think I tried to search for it. And yet, in 1792, when an iron chest was discovered at the Tuileries Palace containing correspondence between Louis XVI and, among others, Mirabeau, the letter was immediately discredited and removed from the Pantheon. Probably just jealous of his womanizing, I imagine. Alright, yeah, that was already here, right? Here, Death of Mirabeau. It's like the exact same section, but whatever. We are making some progress. Montgolfier flight. Science was a subject of speculation and intense debate at the end of the 18th century. The public were invited to various experiments to attest to scientific advances. Balloons were a firm favorite of the masses in the 1780s, and in particular on July 11, 1784. The Montgolfier brothers were among the first men to launch manned ascents in hot air balloons. Brothers Joseph and Etienne conducted an experiment in Paris under the patronage of the French Academy of Sciences. On September 9, 1883, a balloon was flown with the first living beings, a sheep, a duck and a rooster. Sounds like the beginning of a great joke. A sheep, a duck and a rooster all get in a big balloon and float away. Haha, what happened next? I don't know, they were literally never seen again. That same year in Paris, that same year in Paris, Jean-François Pilatre de Roger and the Marquis d'Arlandes would be the first humans to lift off in a balloon. The crowd of curious onlookers gathered to witness the scene. Yeah, but I don't understand. It's a very confusing section again. The public were invited to experiments. Balloons were favorites, in particular on July 84. So something happened in 84. And then it goes generic. The Montgolfier brothers were the first men to launch manned ascents. The brothers conducted animal experiments in 83, the year before it. So the last year that is mentioned is 83 with animals. And then over here it says in the same year. Is that then in 83? The first humans would live in a balloon. Alright, fine, so that's good. But then what happened on July 11th, 84? Balloons were a firm favorite of the masses in the 80s, and in particular on July 11, 84. Yeah, maybe it's, yeah, the Montgolfier brothers were among the first men to launch manned ascent in hot air balloons. Among the first. Because over here in 83, already these other guys already launched people up in the air. I find it a bit confusing, sorry. The setup. Just start with these guys that they, or start with the animals in September 83, then say that these guys put people in the air also in 83, and then say that the other guys also on July 11 put people in the air. That would make it so much easier to read instead of like a mixed bag of information tidbits. Maybe it's just me, I'm probably overthinking it, but anyways, persecution of the Templars under Philippe the Fair. I think we already read this. This is whatever. Yes, we for sure already read this. I know this footnote over here. Yeah, so I'm skipping that one. I'm 100% sure we read it. September Massacres. The military situation in 1892 was deteriorating, although the Duke of Brunswick, commander-in-chief of the German army, had made his way through Lorraine onto French soil. It was the defeat at Verdun on September 92 that scared the French deputies. With this sword of Damocles hanging over the head of Paris, a great many revolutionaries called for a radical purge of all opposition. Among them was Marat, who exclaimed, "Rise up! Rise up, let the blood of the traitors flow." In a similar vein, Danton memorially affirmed, against the Duke of Brunswick and the invaders, "We need audacity, and yet more audacity, and always audacity, and France shall be saved." Alright. Quite an audacious thing to say. He's setting a good example. At this time the prisons were filled with thousands of men and women, some hostile to the revolution, such as non-juring priests and former aristocrats, but also common law criminals and lunatics. Fearing that the prisons were a veritable nest of traitors waiting to strike at Paris from within, even as Brunswick invaded from without, the revolutionaries made for the prisons and began murdering anyone even remotely suspected of counter-revolutionary sentiment. It's crazy. Between 1019 and 1395 prisoners were killed before the massacres finally ceased. These outbursts of punitive violence had left their mark on the Parisians, although a number of deputies insisted that these actions had been necessary. In the provinces they engendered disapproval and horror with regard to Paris, but they also spread terror among potential opponents. It's crazy. Alright, one moment. I'm just curious. Engender. I know what it more or less means. Yeah. Cause or give rise to. Storming of the Bastille. With the price of the bread at an all-time high in July of 89, Paris was on the brink of revolt. Believe me, at that stage it had been revolting for some time. Wait. Yeah, we for sure already read that one. Skipping it. Theft of the French crown jewels. According to an inventory made in 1691, the French crown jewels comprised 5,885 diamonds, 1,588 precious stones and 488 pearls. Among the most famous gems were the Regents, a 140.64 carat diamonds, the Sancy, a 55.23 carat pale yellow diamond that Louis XIV liked to affix to his head, and the most famous, the blue diamond of the French crown, or French blue, a crudely finished stone weighing 115 carats, bought from the colonies of the Indies. The jewels were stolen in September 92 when the royal treasury was looted by rioters. The thieves were quickly arrested and executed at the Place de la Révolution, and yet many of the collection's most precious items were never recovered. Crazy. Trial of Louis XVI. The trial of Louis Capet, as the deposed Louis XVI was called, began on December 11, 92. He faced 11 charges, including having tried to prevent the meeting of the Estates General, and in so doing of having made an attempt upon liberty, having ordered the storage of grain, sugar and coffee, having made an agreement with Leopold II and the King of Prussia to restore the French monarchy, and having suspended the execution of a decree against the refractory priests. Louis retaliated to each of the charges and sought to give weight to his arguments, even if he knew that his fate was sealed and that there was little he could do to prevent it. He was not resigned to it. On January the 15th, so that is like a month later, the National Convention declared Louis Capet guilty of conspiracy against public freedom. 691 deputies voted yea in favor of a verdict of guilty. Not a single deputy voted nay. Sentencing would proceed over the following 2 days, with the main point of debate being whether Louis should be imprisoned, exiled or put to death. And if it were to be execution, should the sentence be carried out immediately or held in abeyance until a more politically opportune time. In the end, immediate execution carried the day with 361 votes. The exact number needed for a majority. But there are 691 deputies. So how is... okay. That's a lot more. I think you need less than those numbers to get half of 691 is 345 or 46. Alright, whatever. It's almost like it was planned that way. Alright, there's one word I am curious about. Abeyance. I think it's like delay or something. Postponement. One moment. Yeah, it's some kind of postponements, putting it on hold. A state of temporary disuse or suspension. Alright, and it's apparently written with an E instead of an A. So it is A-B-E-Y-A-N-C-E, I think. War with Austria. Alright, how long do we have? Alright, we're hitting the 40-minute marker. Austria was one of France's northern neighbors. Well, apart from the countries in between, of course. I've seen Abstergo mess with history plenty of times. But geography is a new one. Austria did control what was to become Belgium at the time, so perhaps that's what was meant. But come now, people, clarity. And their history leading up to the revolution was notoriously rocky. Even the king's marriage to an Austrian woman didn't smooth relations between the countries. Marie Antoinette was regarded with suspicion, and gossip accused her of having too great an influence on the king's decisions. In 1792, the Legislative Assembly decided that war was a good way to export its problems. and declared war on Austria. The war progressed slowly until a mob attacked the Tuileries Palace in Paris. Yeah, indeed, you have politicians or rulers that can't deliver the goods themselves, and then they just go for a fake target, like a diversion method. It's nothing more than diversion. And starting a war, killing peoples just to consolidate your own power. It is, man, people like that. It is amazing, but they exist in droves. The war progressed slowly until a mob attacked the Tuileries Palace in Paris, and the Austrians began to invade France. They easily took Verdun, a short march from Paris, causing panic in the city and probably leading to the September massacres. Crazy, mass psychosis. Only they call it spreading the revolution, a wonderful political spin. Indeed, it's purely a spin. The French troops, however, rallied to form a resistance and held off the Austrians at Valmy on September the 20th. The battle was trumpeted as a major victory for France and resulted in the beginning of an Austrian retreat. Whatever. Women at the expense of 2,000 people killed in September. Citizens of France. Crazy. The Women's March was one of the inciting events of the French Revolution and effectively brought the king under the power of the state, which I should note is exactly what Mirabeau wanted and part of the reason the assassins were there in the first place. On October the 5th, 1809, tired of wanting for food and especially bread, more than 700 women from Les Halles, the biggest market in Paris, decided to act. They converged at the Paris City Hall, which they subsequently ransacked, taking 1,700 muskets and 4 cannons. Workers from the Saint-Marceau and Saint-Antoine district would come and join them. The crowd then made for Versailles. When the crowd reached the marble courtyard of the Chateau of Versailles, the king appeared. The crowd grew silent, respectful of their monarch. Then the queen emerged. The angry mob hurled abuse at her before they began to shout to Paris. The king and queen, along with their children, were forced to return to the capital, where they stayed at the Tuileries Palace. Alright, I'm just curious. Les Halles. This is Halles au Blé. Okay, then Les Halles is somewhere else. That market indeed. Here. No, this is Église. I'm pretty sure this was called that Underbelly of Paris. There was an entry about the Underbelly of Paris, and I think just quickly checking it, trying to find it. Oh shit, I think I already am over the 40-minute marker. Halles au Blé. No, that is the one that we also have on the map. I'm looking at Les Halles, which I think is something different than Halles au Blé. Here, Les Halles. Yeah, it's so weird. It is in here. And I assume it is the market. There's only one really big market in the game, and that's over here. So I assume it's over there. But there's no icon here. It's really weird. This icon refers to that church. Why is there no icon for Les Halles itself? Unless it's not there, but I don't think it's on the... anywhere else where there is a market. Not here, not on Ile de la Cité, pretty sure. Also not over here. Not here. This is yeah, something else. It was a convent turned theater. This is Cour des Miracles. Yeah, it's just not here. There's nothing else. So if I would have to wager, I would say this is Les Halles, and then it's really weird that there is a database entry but not a marker. But anyways, there are more important stuff. I have to end the episode. Good thing is that we did make some progress. The events are cleared. So in the next episode we will be running through the items. Guys, hope you enjoyed. I hope to see you there. For the meantime, do not forget, always do keep on gaming. See you later.